Cool. Can everyone hear us just fine? If we can get a thumbs up and a confirmation, we'll go on ahead and get going. Thank you all for your time and for joining us this afternoon. You know, you can kind of get lost in day and nighttime in the museum space. But I'm Chase McCurdy. We're here in the Marjorie Barrick Museum. This is a good friend of mine, Professor Erica Vital-Lazare, Professor of Creative Writing, Marginalized Voices, and Dystopian Literatures at the College of Southern Nevada. We are here in the space of my current exhibition, Threads in Time. And what we really wanted to do with this time that's about 45 minutes to an hour or so is let you into kind of the conversational aspect of the work. Erica and I are good friends, and we've shared many fantastic conversations in my studio, gallery spaces, or wherever else we tend to come together, even dinners or whatever else. And the work hopefully tends to provide a great point of conversation, and we want to just kind of let you all into this. If you have questions or input along the way, we'll have someone checking out the live feed. Hopefully we can get to them. But I'm actually kind of nervous to hear what kind of questions and where Erica takes us, so we'll go on ahead and get started.
Okay. With your permission, dear heart, I wanted to acknowledge where we are. So we are here at UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, within the Barrick Museum on this campus, which is situated on the ancestral lands of the Southern Paiute. We want to express our gratitude and our recognition for that. And I have to say, yes, I have many questions. Some of them we have already, bandied about, casually and with love, but also some kind of formalistic questions. But I wanted to say that, yes, it's hard to determine day or night. It's always illuminated, bright, a kind of day when you're in this space and surrounded by your work in particular. There's illumination, there's brightness, there's a horizon. But outside, the weather, right, is uncharacteristically textured with this darkness. There's a layering of blue and gray, and yet hints of amber to it, and it made me think of your paintings. It really did. It made me think of the heaviness to some of the images, and I don't mean in a way that it is oppressive, but there is something imminent, there's something coming. Either the clouds, again like the weather outside here in Las Vegas, are about to break, and there's some rain, some precipitation, some nourishment pouring forth, or either the heavens are going to open and there's a portal, and you're going to be snatched up to this place that was undetected but was there all along. So when you create your work, is this the experience that you want your viewer to have, like that sort of transporting into this place?
I mean, the fact that you can get, potentially both sides from that experience of the work means a lot. I'm one to say that there's no intended message for the viewer. I have nothing explicit. I'm really trying to make them, that I'm trying to communicate in a way. I guess it's a reflection in the work of my contending with the everyday realities of this world, right? And in that, the spectrum of emotions plays a role, and of experiences. So there are those days and moments and times when it feels as though things are about to come down. And there are those moments, admittedly a lot of times when I'm making the work, where I feel as though I'm somewhere else. And I'm transported elsewhere. A lot of these portals or different things you see kind of come up in a lot of individuals' interpretation of the work. And even this kind of painting, a young person, I'll never forget, a 12-year-old, the first person to see this painting really when it was done in the studio. He looked at it and he said, I said, "What do you see?" He said, "The end of the world." And I said, wow. that's powerful, but you know, if I'm being honest with a lot of my considerations and seeing where things have been over the years, I mean, and this was made in 2018, I had a feeling like things weren't right and something's got to give. So yeah, it's whatever comes, no intended, I guess, message, but in conversation, a lot of very interesting feelings, ideas, and interpretations are shared.
Beautiful. Well, the name of your exhibit is Threads in Time. So I wanted to go back to the beginning. So with a lot of your earlier images, and when you come into the museum to see the exhibit, you will find those earlier images. They really display the pattern of the grid, and I get the feeling that you're giving us this board where the game is played. And my question was, you know, there are a lot of abstract artists who have been sort of playing with the image of the chessboard. You have like Marcel Duchamp and Rachel Whitfield. I mean, they play with different ways to approach the board and the game. So my question for you, knowing you, I think I already know the answer, but I want to hear from you whether you're subverting the game, the social order of the game, or whether you're imposing the order.
I think at first it started out just sincerely trying to understand the game for what it is. You know, really a sincere and concerted effort to remove myself and my ego and study and observe and listen to others and really try to get a good grasp of what this thing, this world, this reality is. You know, just so that I can maybe approach it in some sort of a sincere way. And so it's a recognition of the game. There have been times where that game can be oppressive towards you, and it can seem like you can't escape it. But at the same time, I think the progression, and as we talk about Threads in Time, in the early works being in that 2017, 2018 neighborhood, and then as we go further down, getting into 2020 and 2021, well, really 2020, nothing this new. You know, over time, there's understanding the game, dealing with the game, and at this point, I'm kind of just whatever. I don't care about whatever game. I'm doing my own thing, sincerely.
So you're not on the board?
No, I'm gone. I left that. It's whatever, truly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so are you constructing a new board? I mean, you leave some of the grid patterning, yeah, and even the flatter dimensions of the earlier work. It starts to go into this wider space, even in your color palette. You can see it sort of emerging here. You've got the golds, you've got like that emergence of the red, the supreme presence of power that red is in Yoruba, you know, lore. So you're starting to infuse color, and then it gets even more saturated, more open. So can you tell us about the journey from that sort of anti-dimensional space, sort of what is known, to these wider unknowns?
You know, I love sharing this kind of progression because it's very much personally lived, and being able to now speak to it sometime past. But there was a point where, I guess figuratively, or even intellectually, emotionally, I kind of dove into the black hole, right? I kind of dove into the unknown on a deep, deep search for knowledge and understanding. And one of the things I love about the black hole is, you know, it's this phenomenon in space and nature that we have no idea about, right? It's a black hole because it's this point in space where something crosses over into or falls into, and you don't hear from it again. And I think we all kind of take for granted that we make decisions in that kind of way every day. We make a number of decisions every day, unsure of the outcome. And so figuratively, in a larger sense, I went through that with myself, my practice. And so after going in, I feel it could be like a coming out of the black hole in like another dimension. I talk about dimension hopping. I got something somewhere recently. I either wrote or said to a friend, I'm not like time or like light years ahead. I'm dimensions apart. Right? It's just floating somewhere else. Having to be present here, but I'm always kind of somewhere else.
How did you take that first journey somewhere else?
Unknown. I had really no idea. Truth be told, it started being in a very alone place, you know, a place of struggle, a place where feeling like I had nothing but my practice. You know, at the time it was primarily just a camera when this kind of world first began, and myself, and you know, and that journey really started. And just you're not really sure of it. You know, I think in a previous exhibition I had exploration prior to this one at the West Las Vegas Library a couple years ago. That exhibition is very much talking about that idea of just diving into the unknown and only knowing when you come out of it, that you went into it, right? And that's even individuals who know me personally will know, like, why aren't you sharing like the work you're making now? And I'm like, honestly, fam, like it takes me some time to understand even and put into context what I'm making in the moment. You know, I'm just letting it happen and then kind of filling in even my own personal blanks.
So it's almost as though you allow yourself to journey into those other spaces and you're documenting. Do you find yourself positioning and documenting where you are, and you can't bring it back out to the rest of us until you have?
It's hard, yeah, because over time I developed an interesting relationship with photography, being something I started as wholly personal, then something I started to try to make a living by or with, and struggling behind and not having that free place that's an escape. And then getting into some like very philosophical considerations of what photography is. And over time coming to see photography, pardon me, as a fairly violent activity. Something that is, you know, even the words we use, shooting, you know, capturing, you know, we're in many ways taking things from life, and many times we associate memories with a photograph, but sometimes I wonder if we're giving the memory to that instead of keeping it in the moment of making those images. So all these kind of thoughts, and even now with the paintings, like as I've come to mature as an artist who's been painting for some time and understanding that practice, it does feel kind of like I'm taking again. You know, and I could leave these experiences, these places, but I try to respect it, but it does feel almost like a taking from somewhere else.
You know? A taking and a sharing.
So I have, yeah.
I think before we started this live moment, you and I, we were sharing our love of Octavia Butler.
Yes.
And God is change.
Yes.
Whatever you touch, you change. Whatever. Say the quote for me.
Whatever you touch, you change. Whatever you change, changes you.
Changes you.
Yeah.
And we can bring in, right, the first directive for Star Trek. You can't be present in the universe without moving the energy that embodies you towards someone else, whether benignly or not. So the taking and the sharing, I feel as though I hear what you're saying, and that's something to consider, that in documenting the places you've gone, you're actually capturing again that language, that which had been gifted and bestowed onto you. And yet, going back to Butler, right, that change that comes over you is something that is a change in the world. It's part of the fabric that knits us all together. And so I'm not pushing back against that feeling of taking, but I think I'm coming to a place as someone who loves art and makes art through language, that I understand that perhaps that's the bargain we strike, that we have to take in order to give. There is something very colonializing about it.
That's we try to avoid that, the colonizer, what I call like the colonizer mindset.
Yeah.
that's a piece of writing actually to cut from the audio recordings here, but I think something along the lines of the colonizer mindset is simply the desire to own and objectify everything that garners its attention. And that's the idea, like I try to be a sincere explorer without, wanting to take over for myself. It's understanding how selfish and personal an activity like this is. I try to make it as much not about me as possible.
That's beautiful, and I think too that when we talk about colonizing, and you express that so well, is that you take space and you hold it for yourself. You exclude others from gaining access, and it seems that your practice is to open up and to make accessible those places that we might not have even known existed.
It's funny because I seem from the outside very closed off, and I'm actually very open. Which is part of why I think a natural thing is to just hold my space. Real quick, have there been any questions or comments of any sort that are interesting? Or not interesting, because that's not fair. But just, yeah.
One question, kind of curious about if you can speak about the piece directly behind you.
Oh, yeah, there's a question to speak on this painting directly behind me. This painting is titled Culmination. This was a work I made around the time of 2018. It's a large painting on a big piece of wood. Why wood? Because it was cheap and I had access to it. This was before, in a very fortunate and serendipitous way, I came across some large canvases which constitute some of the other works here. But this is a painting that for me is very special because it is very much an inflection point between two worlds. In my practice, I'm very fond of saying it's a physical manifestation of the spiritual. I know people I know may roll their eyes at this point, but I try not to direct my work. So there's a certain point in time where my work was very straight edge. I was using tape and rulers and only straight lines and confining myself quite a bit. And then over time, my line became free. My use of color became more free. And this kind of happened as I'm naturally living this, right? And so this painting really shows, it's called Culmination, so maybe I don't like to think of it as the end of one, beginning of another, but just the flowing of one into another points in time, and not only my practice, but my personal life.
Beautiful. I think I've shared with you, and I think this goes to the question as well in your explanation of culmination. This is a landscape to me. These physical manifestations, and I've shared that with you before, particularly the work that comes out of 2020 is evocative of landscape. And I'm thinking about the subversive sort of work of early landscape artists of color. I love Henry Ossawa Tanner and Palmer Hayden. So for them, they were rendering these beautiful, expansive spaces in nature, which for many reasons they were denied ownership of. And could you talk a little bit about the ownership of the landscape, which you eschew ownership, I understand, but.
Yeah, we'll start there, like trying to go back, this idea of, not even owning, the landscapes or the nature that I think appears in the new paintings is, it's familiar, but it's not the same. This is an untouched land, or on this is the other side of the black hole, right? Maybe our planet's sister in another dimension somewhere, but this is something that's not governed by the rules of this space. This is maybe a free place. So it's me once again observing, like this is the place that I found myself in, and trying not to control it, because the paintings have taken another direction already than some of those. And it'd be nice to make, because I love those works, like it'd be nice to make works of that nature for a long time, but it's already gone as quick as we've been there. So it's just observing and appreciating where we are in that moment, what the work has given me at that moment. and but it is a free landscape. I think of it as a place that has yet to be touched in that way.
And that's the danger and the irony, right, is that once you show us the space, we want to inhabit it.
Yeah.
And go back to the notions of colonization, right? So I'm wondering if there is a particular price of the ticket, if we want to reference James Baldwin. Like, as we stand outside some of your pieces, and I know I've had that experience in your studio, where I feel as though you are showing the place that I can gain entry once I pay that price. What is the price? Who can then gain entry? I mean, what is the stopgap between colonization and invitation?
Anyone's free, you know, I don't make the rules, just like I didn't create that world, you know, I just stumbled upon it. You know, anyone's free to go and try and experience anything. I think maybe the price of the ticket, for me, has come in a continual deep personal exploration, challenging, attempted understanding, working, you know, only through, you know, time, just intentional time and space. You know, friends and family know me as someone who, you know, I'm dedicated to my practice and my work, and I think it shows in that all that time alone, whether it be in silence, in a form of meditation, or just working, or just thinking, or whatever it is, there have been some experiences, once again, that you only really recognize when you come on the other side of them.
Yes.
In many ways, like, I will say that having conversations with individuals who've experienced like psychedelic drugs and different things of that nature and have experimented, there are some interesting relationships there. I feel like, you know, as human beings, there are dimensions of experience that we have not been able to experience in large degree. I think our society, in many ways, oppresses many of us and prevents us from being our most human. And so just trying to capture little glimpses and trying to live little glimpses of the most full being that one can be.
So,
do you have any?
You have 2 more questions.
And time. What are we doing on? How are we doing on time?
So how are we doing on time, you think?
So we're about 25 minutes in.
Perfect. What are the questions? First one.
We have one question that asks, how do you decide the compositional structures in your work? Is it planned, or are there elements of chance that play into your work?
Folks are gonna think I'm wild, and I promise you, every single work I make, nothing starts pre-planned. I say I'm an impulse-driven artist. I'm very fortunate in that, like, I never really have problems with, like, inspiration or things like that. There's a lot going on in this world that really gets at me. So I think there's a lot going on in here. But the work is all impulse-driven. And I'm many times surprised by it. Now, that's not to say that in a point in time, like, as I'm making, you know, works regularly, like, over time there will be, like, a relationship, right? Over a point in time, because I make work every day. Like, I'm constantly, I'm going. So, like, yeah, there's a relationship at a point in time, but once that thing is gone, it's gone. Like, I don't think I could go back and recreate this kind of world of painting anymore, because it's intimately related to how I was feeling in that moment. And all I can do is understand it and not try to control it. I think if I tried to control it, it wouldn't be what it is.
Cool. The next question is kind of going back to what you two were talking about. You say you now feel as if you're still taking when you're doing your painting. How do you feel you are taking, and from where? From yourself and/or your subconscious, a collective unconscious?
Yeah, I think you can, from where, I think any number of people may put different words on it. Some may call it from spirit, some may call it, you know, that kind of broader unconscious, or that shared consciousness. I'm not sure. You know, I just have to be honest in saying that, like, I'm not thinking of how to make these paintings, so they're coming from somewhere. And people in my life know me as probably a fairly spiritual individual, but I also try not to play with the spiritual, like because I also regard like sentimentality and romanticism with a bit of suspicion. No offense. So I think it's just, you know, from where I'm not sure, but I do feel shared with, and I do feel in ways vessel-like, not to once again romanticize that notion. And so I just try to be humble and just allow it to do its thing, and I just try to remove myself, knowing that I'm there, right? Like I try for perfection, knowing that doesn't exist. All the contradictions.
Well, how do you prepare your vessel? Like, you make work every day, and this is something I know about you. So if you don't mind, like, what is the way in which you prepare it every day? I know you have certain timed rituals, and can you talk about those? Yeah,
kind of. Sometimes I jump into it. It just depends on the work. You know, if it's just, I have a lot of notebooks with just colored pencil drawings, and you know, I'll just start moving and grooving. Or sometimes I just get that impulse to make an image with the camera, and I boom, boom, and keep going. Or if it's a larger work, you know, and this is where the fun relationship lies, because it's easy to be, you know, free and fun and just flowing with a small piece of paper or something that we may consider to be inconsequential. But to maintain that same kind of freedom of impulse, right? Because when I talk about like not pre-visualizing, when I'm working on something like this, there are visions in one's head that may want to tell you where to take it, but to not let that go through, especially over time, because something like this, just putting the ground layers on, you know, we're talking like 6, 7, 8 layers of primer and gesso and sanding and talking to this piece. And, you know, one of my pieces in the studio now, that canvas, I'll never forget, a rather emotional day as I was preparing it and some of the early layers were drying. I read Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail to this painting. And to this day, this painting has like a strong just spirit to it for me. But, you know, there's that process, but once again, it's just letting them form themselves, you know, because there is the technical aspect of the work, priming and getting ready, doing all of that. As a, you know, someone who's been a professional with this, I've had to learn all of those things. But, you know, each practice, each medium just kind of has its way. I always have my notebook present in case something written wants to jump out. You know, I'm just always ready to let whatever happens.
So you are a very spiritual person. I'm wondering what inspired you on that day to read King's words to that particular piece.
It's the intellectual pursuits crossing over with the artistic, you know, because I'm always reading, I'm always researching, I'm always finding firsthand sources and documents of that nature, interview, something that someone wrote themselves, read themselves, said themselves, and it's just one of those where it just, much like the impulse to create a work, that impulse to read that, to that painting came.
So you listen.
I have to.
This present work, which is very much, again, landscape informed. You said that it's a place that you can't really go back to.
Maybe, I'm lucky.
And you love Jack Whitten, his work,
yeah.
And there's a piece of his Dead Reckoning, and when he was making that piece, he said that there is a theoretical space in the cosmos that once you reach it, right, you've gone too far to make it back or even to attempt a viable return. Like, so is that where you find yourself going, to that point in the cosmos of freedom that makes it maybe not viable to return?
I can't say I've gone that far because I have returned, right? When I talk about my practice being something very innate that comes from whatever that is in here, I think of like my life in terms of like a spiritual practice and living as well. And like I realized, hopefully at some point in my life, you know, with age, experience, and time, as I get older, God willing, you know, that I won't have the whatever is in here that needs to come out every day, because it is kind of exhausting. The spirit will be more at ease. But right now there's a going and a coming back, and I'll tell you, coming back is hard. Because going, you realize if you were ultimately selfish, yes, like I could, you know, you could leave and just not want anything to do with certain aspects of this shared existence. But one chooses, for me at least, to come back to share and to be a good family member and community member and son and cousin, all of these things. But, you know, that place of no return, I haven't reached yet. But I think that's the part of the no return, you know?
Well, you know when you would have arrived. I mean, you know?
I guess, put it this way, those who know where I was before I went to no return will know that I found no return.
Right. I understand. I understand. So you speak of community and of family, which I know you are devotedly immersed in both community and family. They're one and the same for you. And you and I are both fans of Afrofuturism. And I'm reading Rashida Phillips' Black Quantum Futurism. Oh my gosh, okay, when I'm done, I'm passing it to you. But she speaks of our moving away from 2 and 3 dimension, which is the place of family, which is the place of community, to this place where there is limitless possibility. And I feel as though that's where your vision is. That's where your practice is, limitless possibility. That's the place we kind of come back from, because when one is like really trying to get to know this world, reality for what it is, it starts with the self, and then those closest to oneself. And so there's that act of attempting to understand for the good, bad, and the ugly, but not judging. And it's, you know, to try to be critical of those who starts with oneself, and then as you're trying to understand those around you and more, right, how your relationships are the way they are, and the rest, and you know, that's a place where you have to step outside of yourself when we talk about removing from the self, just to see what things are, and then coming back and sharing. But yeah, I mean, that place of limitless possibility is where you remove the self and that ego and all of that which is associated, which in our attention-driven society, there have been some good things, but I think this thing that has made attention the currency has done something that makes it a bit difficult to touch that limitless possibility at times. Because you're always tethered to outcome in some form of
You're always outcome, thought, consideration. It's hard to free oneself of the constraints of this world. You know, you can think of it as an invisible hand even at times. You can be outside in the most beautiful day, but something related to this world, much like gravity, it can just be holding you down. And it is what it is. It's not, oh, yeah.
So we have another question. Can you talk a bit about your self-published book and the lives of future generations, and how your work was affected by those poems? How did you decide which poem goes with each piece?
Oh man, so you own And the Lives. Shout out, love and respect. That's funny. That is a piece of work that I can show it. I could bring it to the studio and show it to you. That is a notebook, made point in time, and I literally just took pages in order of that notebook, how it happened. Sharing it, I think I shared it like 2 years later. I'm not really sure why, it just felt right. But all my notebooks kind of look in many different ways, but similar to that. And so that's how that happened. These pairings of writing and work was a bit different, because a lot of these larger works are freestanding and self-fulfilled. So I'm constantly, once again, part of my practice is writing, right? The little thoughts, it comes out poetic, it may come out like an essay, it may come out like a blurb, really whatever. And so when I'm putting together an exhibition, this normally for me requires going back some years and looking at, first surveying the work, doing the reading in my own notebooks of trying to see what there is and see what that relationship is. And as I'm kind of culling through and selecting the work on the physical side and the visual side, over time, like the written tends to mesh. Even like the opening statement on the wall for this exhibition, there's between each of those little blurbs or paragraphs, you could put a couple lines, and those are individual writings, pretty much as they are from different points in time in different notebooks. So yeah, it's just, sometimes it just happens, and then sometimes it's just through reflection of one's own self and work.
Did you find that?
Right at 12:40, cool.
Did you start writing when you were in Paris, or was that something that has always been a part of your practice?
To a small degree, always kind of been there, but before Paris, I'll never forget, I was in New York, and I had visited, shout out to, I doubt she remembers it, but I remember looking up, being influenced by this book I got at the library on Black photographers by Dr. Deb Willis over at NYU. I went to New York, I emailed Dr. Willis like, you don't know me, I'm just some young brother that's trying to be a photographer, I'd love like any of your time. She invited me to her office just for a few minutes, and we spoke. And Dr. Willis is the mother of Hank Willis Thomas, very notable Black artist doing his thing. And so she just shared some info, and she said, oh, you should check out this exhibition opening. I don't normally go to exhibition openings. It's at a hoity-toity like gallery in New York, and it was for Bruce Davidson. Some of his photographs, if you don't know him, photography students, really anybody, check out Bruce Davidson, some of his work in like the New York City subways and the rest in like the 80s. OG Wild Boy. But, you know, I was in that space. I'm kind of uncomfortable in those spaces, so I'm kind of by myself just looking at things. He's a white-haired older cat at this point, probably in his 70s. He comes up to me, and he said, are you a photographer? I said, yes, sir, I'm a photographer. He said, one thing I would say to every young photographer is to write more and write poetically. And somebody else got his attention, and that was the extent of our coming together. But the next morning, I think when I was leaving my cousin's apartment, who I was staying with, instead of a camera, I just took a notebook with me. I always had a notebook, but I left the camera, and I just told myself, instead of, whenever I get that impulse, right, to make an image, instead of making an image, I'm gonna just write whatever kind of comes or happens. And then from there, I used to make an old zine, VVL, like Truth Shall Set You Free. And out of that came a zine that was all writing and just kind of poetic based, and just kind of went from there.
So you reached out to Deborah Willis, whose work is phenomenal. She and Lorna Simpson really capture images of what it is to inhabit certain spaces in certain forms. And they also bring in, on occasion, lines of text, incorporate text with photographic images. So I love hearing that she opened her doors to you in that way, and that you had a messenger just walk up to you in the form of such a revered photographer to come and tell you of his experience. He just gave you the message and then dipped out. And
I think, honestly, since I think we're coming up on that time, this probably is a great place to end. And because it's, you know, this practice over the years, because it's been a solid 10 at this point of trying to live by whatever this creative, artistic, you know, going through the L's, some W's as well. But just trying to be sincere in practice, trying to be sincere in the way one interacts with the world around oneself. I've been like the spirit, whatever you want to call it, has let me know on a number of occasions, like, you're just doing the right thing, and to just keep following it. And I think it's just that idea of just trying to be decent and work in a sincere fashion. And yeah, it's the way some things have worked out has been amazing. I feel fortunate.
And I know we're ending, but I can't help but ask you about the ways in which you are converging future and past. And I'm speaking specifically about Legacy Park. And you're very humble, but you've been commissioned to really fill a space, a historic space. It's about, you know, legacy, Black legacy, on your home grounds. Can you talk a little bit about that before we go?
The Legacy Park is an amazing project. Public park, but also like a plaza, events plaza over on the west side, to really honor those individuals who made that community, that very special community, what it is. And in being involved, kind of writing and putting together a historical narrative that tries to, you know, at least give a glimpse into the particular storied and just special history of that space and those people, and the artwork as well. You know, it's just another humbling experience, you know, because it's like, yeah, like it's a cool thing, and I have to remind myself of how cool of an opportunity it is. But really, it's just been like an overwhelming sense of, I don't want to say pressure, because that's the wrong connotation, but you know, it's been, I want to get it right, because I have, you know, have elders in the community who have been there for decades, and who won't, we're talking 90s, who we don't know how much longer a lot of these people are going to be here. So being able to work with them, capture the history, and try to just do it right, has been a very humbling experience. And you just want to get it right.
Beautiful. Yeah. And you're building monuments. I have to.
And building, yeah, some large original sculptural works will be in there as well that I've created. Yeah. Much love and respect. We appreciate all of you for joining us.